As y'all have heard me say before, the most important part of planning any adventure are the snacks. And if you're looking for a delicious and nutritious snack that packs a real protein punch, crack into a good source of protein with tasty, healthy, wonderful pistachios. Each 1 ounce serving of wonderful pistachios contains 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value in that one serving. It's one of the highest protein nuts out there. And that's not all. Pistachios are also known for the fiber and better for you unsaturated fats, which may help keep you feeling fuller longer. Best part, wonderful pistachios come in a variety of flavors and sizes. Perfect for enjoying with your family and friends or taking them with you on your summer adventures for those snacks we're talking about. So whether you're dropping off the kiddos or running between meetings or about to climb a mountain, fuel up with a healthy and tasty snack. Wonderful Pistachios will be your new go-to. You can check them out at wonderfulpistachios.com and learn more about how these little green wonders can power up your day. For all of us, there are windows of opportunity for adventure. Sometimes it is between high school and college or after college. For me, after college, I took a year or two to kind of just do adventures. Looking back, I felt like I wasted a lot of time, but I didn't know that at the time. But that was a time that I could afford adventure in the sense of having free time and having almost no expenses or responsibility. Now, on the other hand, I'm in a time of life where I have young kids. I can still do plenty of adventures, but they're shorter, they're less expensive, they're closer to home usually. I did get out for almost a week-long backpack trip to Yosemite last year before this record snowfall, so it's still possible, but for a lot of us, it's either then or it's going to be at retirement. And so today's guest, Marianne Bohr, is talking about kind of not quite retirement, but closer to that end of the spectrum with her most recent book called The 20, which is about hiking on the island of Corsica, the GR20, a famous and difficult footpath in Europe, and doing it at 60 years old. And as we're going to hear, Marianne and her husband, upended their lives, sold their home, made all kinds of sacrifices to do this trip, and are coming back. They got to get back to work when they come back. They're not totally done with their life. They live in Park City, Utah. Gap Year Girl, her first book, a baby boomer adventure across 21 countries. And over the course of a year, 55 years old. And you think, at 55, maybe you could retire. Most people can't. You still have a good decade or so of your working life, if not more, but it's possible. So there are times of life that you can make, even though there aren't the traditional times you have space for, a year-long adventure. You can make space for a year-long adventure. We're making sacrifices, doing things different, and Marianne's going to teach us about that. So we're going to talk kind of a lot about Gap Year Girl, the first book, and the 20, what to expect. I learned a lot about the hiking paths, the GR paths. But anyway, let's go ahead and dive into Marianne's story. This was a lovely conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you do too. All right, folks, welcome to Adventure Sports Podcast. Today, on the other end of the line, we have Marianne Bohr. How's it going, Marianne? Welcome to Adventure Sports Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a good day.
Is it? All right. Where is that good day? Where are you coming from today? And is that home?
I'm in Park City, Utah, and that is home. Yeah, my husband and I retired here about 6 years ago.
No kidding. So where did you come from? And is that where you grew up? And if not, where did you grow up? Where did you kind of spend your childhood?
I was born in Indiana, and my family moved every 2 years or so. Not the military. My dad was with GE, but I spent my teen years on New York's Long Island. And then after my husband and I got married, we lived for 35 years in Bethesda, Maryland, right outside DC. That's where we raised our kids. Yeah. We retired from Maryland here to Park City.
Something you talked about in your first book when you were the gap year girl, was how important compatibility is, and I think y'all got to test that out early on with some international experiences. But and I kind of want to go from those early experiences into Gap Year Girl and how it led to the 20, if that's all
Right.
right. And tell us about some of those first backpacking experiences. I think it was right after college. Y'all left for an extended period of time. Where'd you go and what was that?
I was a French major in college, and then I did a year of graduate study in France after college. And at the end of that year, my husband Joe came and joined me for backpacking about 8 weeks, and we were in France, and we sort of made our way down to through Italy over to Greece. We did some hiking in Italy and in Greece, and eventually made our way back up into France. And as students, we took the QE2 home from England because we got standby student tickets for about $150 to go home on that. So, but it was during that those 8 weeks that we said to ourselves, this can't be all there is. Like this can't be the only time we take, an extended trip. And we knew at that point we were probably going to get married at some point. So we said, after we get married, hopefully we'll have kids. We'll get the kids through college, and then we're going to go and take a year. We're just going to take a year and go travel.
Wow. So you the seed was planted a while ago. What was the length of time in between those two experiences?
Let me see. We were 23, and then it was 55. So what was that? 32 years? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, how much did the idea come up in conversation? And I want to say a lot of the listeners of this show, those seem to be the two big options, or kind of the two big the magnetic poles that pull people into the venture. It's either the beginning or the end of a career, or
Right.
a very stark career change like the pandemic, like like a lot of our past guests right around 9/11 I'm sorry, 9/11 was one. The market crash of 2008 was another time people were kind of like opened up, and then the pandemic is kind of this next one that we're getting a lot of stories from, the shifts. But for most of us, it is pre or post career. Tell us about, kind of the ways you went about traveling early on, and I don't know how that philosophy changed over those 30 years, because that's a lot of life to live, and that's a lot of maybe preferences change, comfort levels change, all that.
Yeah, it's true. Comfort levels definitely do change. And, usually you have a little bit more money than you did at 23, because at 23, we didn't have much at all.
No, broke as could be. And you're also, I don't know about you, but as I get older, I notice my daily budget with travel of just what I'm willing to do goes up a little bit. I'm like, I'm not willing to just eat a Snickers bar and a pack of ramen. I need a little bit more.
Exactly. So that definitely changed. But it's funny is from you would think maybe we would have been more active at 23. At 23, it was like our first time seeing a bunch of stuff that we were exploring. So that was like the huge excitement piece. And then when we were older, though, we'd become much more active in terms of I don't know, hiking and kayaking and doing all that kind of thing. So we'd just gotten into that more, which is different from what you would think. But the impetus for us was when our children graduate from college, because we know that, it's almost like getting a raise when all of a sudden your kids are through, no more tuition bills, or mom, can you send me $100? So we always knew that was going to be the point. And our daughter graduated nursing school in December of 2010, and we left in September 2011. And talking about it over the years, we wouldn't talk about it really often until maybe 5 years before we left. But periodically we would say something like, oh, I can't wait till, we can go away, get away from these jobs. And it is funny because I did decide to do a career change because we knew we were going to leave for a year, but we also knew we financially we couldn't retire yet. So we knew we'd come back to the DC area and get jobs again. My husband got another engineering job. He's a marine engineer working for the Department of Defense. And I switched jobs from being in book publishing to teaching French for 5 years. So I did take that opportunity to totally switch and do something I kind of just enjoyed, for the last part of my career. So, and then the third career, I guess, is being a writer.
Yeah, no, and I was going to ask too, had you always been a writer, someone that turned your stories to a written format, or was it the impetus for that kind of breaking up normal life and doing something really different, brought on a new medium for you to express it?
It's the latter. It's the latter. I used to write stories when I was young, till probably through high school. And then, of course, in college, I had so much just college writing to do. And in my jobs, I always wrote a lot. I did some editing, but I never really had the time, raising kids and full-time working, to do my own writing. So it was when in the prep, in the prep, the year of prep, really, for going abroad for a year, that I started writing. And I first started writing just to capture it all. And I started a blog, and some people said, why don't you turn that into a book? So I kind of started maybe a month or two into the gap year. I started realizing how much I enjoyed the writing and said, okay, I'll, afterward, let me see if I can turn this into a book. Now that I found writing, I absolutely love it. Can't give it up.
Maybe you should have done this earlier. That's interesting. So I do want to talk about, all right, so you were 23, early 20s, let's say, for you just kind of bundle it all up. Early 20s, have this experience, said this is not the last time we're going to do extended travel. I know you both love Europe and France. You wanted to spend a gap year. An interest, gap year. We love the concept of a gap year here in the States. Like, we don't, a lot of folks don't do it, but it's very intriguing. But it's obviously usually much younger than that too. So I love this idea of doing it later. A lot more experience. You know what you like a little bit more. You have time to do the research. What were you doing those 30 years to kind of keep that flame alive? Would you take your kids on trips? Like, how did you keep that flame alive? I know you mentioned staying active.
During those years, we so looked forward to our 2 weeks of vacation a year. We put everything into it. We planned it. And a couple we'd go on by ourselves, but we usually took our children. And I had a sister who lived in London for a while, so we took the kids there and went up into Scotland and went hiking. We also, 20 years after that 8-week trip that we took after I was studying, we brought our kids, who were then 12 and 15, with us, and we kind of recreated the trip backpacking. We had to scrunch it into two weeks, but from France down through Italy, the ferry over to Greece, and we took the ferries with the kids all the way down to Crete and did the Samaria Gorge hike with them. So we just always tried to do pretty active vacations every year. And, like I said, just guarded them those 2 weeks jealously, got our kids to really enjoy it. And there's so much joy in bringing, family or friends, bringing them to places you've been and helping, share what you love about them with them. So we did that a lot. And once the kids were off to college, my husband and I did a lot of hiking vacations. We went camping in Yellowstone. We did the rim to rim hike of the Grand Canyon. We took a dory with an outfitter down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. So we always just kept, we just kept trying to be active. And I think really we got in better shape like the older we were. Like I said, it was sort of a turn of events, to become more in shape the older you got.
Folks listening, it's not the other way around like you so often hear. We do see that a lot as well, as folks over time, you become more disciplined a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
How were some of the biggest ways? Because, the idea was to spend an extended period of time somewhere else, a year, an entire
Mm-hmm.
year, which is so much different than a 2-week experience. And y'all
Mm-hmm.
knew this from your experience before. Um, what were some of those concerns going into experiencing a different culture for a year? Like, what were those for y'all looking ahead?
Well, one of our big concerns was we had elderly parents, so it was concerned about them being at home, although they were in pretty good shape. So, although actually my mom had passed away, but my dad was in great shape. Joe's parents were in good shape, and so we thought it was a good time to go. But there was that. There was missing our kids. We were afraid of how much we would miss them, although they came over twice to visit us, Christmas time, and then we both ran the Paris Marathon, so they came over for that. So let me see other concerns. I don't think we had the concerns beforehand, but once we got there, we realized that if we were traveling, because we went to 21 countries, so we were moving around a lot. We realized how much we depended on internet, and we would get really grouchy if we didn't have good internet. And there were often times we didn't. It was back in 2011, and so it wasn't quite as good as it is now. But we did all our planning, of course, on the internet. We had a couple things set, but then in between, looking up where's a hostel or where's a hotel or where's a campground or whatever, we had to do it online. And if we couldn't get to that, we were really frustrated. And I guess another thing, I guess we did think about this a little, but it hit home more when we were away, was, traveling seems glamorous and, so exciting and this and that. And it is, but it's just life after all. So you're just, some days, you don't have any energy. You just want to sit in bed and read. Some days, you're like, oh, I don't know, I'm in Vienna, but I'm really not in the mood to go, walking everywhere. I'm not in a great mood. I just want, so, it's just that there are highs and lows. And once you realize you have those, you just kind of say, okay, it'll pass.
Mhm. Just like life.
Just like life.
You really,
Exactly.
that's enough time to really sink into it. So I do want to ask too, as this idea formulated, I know we're spending a lot of time here, but I know that it leads to the 20.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such an intriguing idea to spend this much time somewhere else. What were the folks around you saying? Either colleagues, your kids, of course, who are adults at this time, and then you're also your parents. Was there like a consensus with your surrounding immediate community, or was everybody all over the place with what they thought about this idea?
They were kind of all over the place. Our kids weren't surprised at all because they knew us, they knew what we do, so they weren't surprised at all. I think our parents just didn't even know what to think about it. Like they just like, oh, you're going away, okay. Like they weren't big travelers.
Are they adventurous like y'all, or is it more
No,
like?
very big distinction, very big. I mean, they just really had no desire to go traveling. They were either scared or they were just comfortable. My parents came with us once to France, but it was because I planned the whole trip, and they had wanted to see Paris, and my dad really wanted to see the D-Day beaches. So they did come with us, but we held their hands the whole way. And I think maybe that's why, once, we didn't really think about camping, adventure, walking, and all that kind of stuff until we were out of school and able to make our own decisions, because we didn't grow up with it. So it wasn't a norm. Some people do, and then they just keep doing it. But some of my friends said, oh my God, it's just going to be the two of you together for a year. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. And my one friend said, I go away with my husband for 2 weeks, and at the end, I'm ready to kill him. So they just couldn't understand just the two of us doing this. And of course we met people along the way.
Right.
But my husband and I are both kind of introverts, so we're always fine just being together. And other people said, you guys are crazy. How could you? Because we sold our house, we sold our car. It's a huge commitment. But again, the kids were out of the house. They were finished college. They were out working. And so we didn't really need the house anymore. And it wasn't a house that they'd grown up in for years. We were there maybe 10 years, but because we'd lived in other houses. So it wasn't like selling the house we'd been in for 40 years.
Right.
But yeah, we needed the proceeds from the house or part of the proceeds, to do our year. And we were pretty sure that when we got back, we would just rent somewhere for a while that would be just for the two of us. And we knew after, when we finished working, we just sort of head west, and we weren't sure where we would go. Our two kids at that point were both living in California. So we thought, we'll just go west. So
let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
So it's so fascinating because this did require those kinds of levels of commitment. Selling your house, selling your car. It's very exciting and nervous on the front end. It is enough time there that you kind of do settle into life.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like I'm sure it's like this initial just crazy excitement, but before long you are having, days you don't feel like doing anything, even though you're only here for a limited amount of time. How do you think this differed doing it at the time you did, at the stage of life, versus if you were to do this, say, 20 years before in your 30s?
Well, obviously, like you said, kids is the big thing. That could we do it with kids, and how, would we homeschool them on the road, or that was the biggest thing. But I would say, I feel like I just keep learning. I'm an avid reader, and so is my husband. So we read a whole lot. So I feel almost like, and we read about a lot of things about the history of Europe or the art, or I read a lot of novels that take place there. And so I feel like maybe, we appreciated it maybe even more when we were older, because we had so much more reading and knowledge under our belts. I'd say that. And if we'd gone in our 30s, unless we had been multimillionaires, in our 30s, I know we would have been much more worried about money, because, in your 30s, you still have a lot of time to live, and raising your kids, and what are we going to do when we get back when we're 30? Whereas when we did go, like I said, the kids had flown the nest, and so we didn't have to kind of worry about them financially. So I know the financial worries would have been more in our 30s.
What were some of those highlights on this experience? And also, maybe some things you didn't anticipate being so important a year abroad.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing was the internet, that we didn't anticipate that was going to be an issue. But some of the other things, I guess we realized, of course, that there were certain countries that we liked much better than others where maybe we didn't enjoy ourselves quite as much. And weather often has a lot to do with it. You can be in the same place and it's 60 and sunny, and you can be in the same place and it's 35 and hailing, and it doesn't seem quite so wonderful. So we had different opinions, and we weren't, for the most part, locked into a lot. So if we went somewhere and we're like, it's not doing it for us, we left, so, but other surprising things, or like you said, highlights. There were two things that just immediately come to mind. And we had a couple times where we splurged. We had an absolutely fabulous dinner in Paris at, a Michelin starred restaurant, Le Grand Véfour, which was just, sublime. And actually what we did was we usually went to lunch because lunch was half as much, but you got the same food. So we just, do that, have wine, go back and take a nap. But then the other one was we were in Turkey outside of Fez. No, I'm sorry, not Turkey, Morocco. We were in Morocco outside of Fez. And we were taken by a guide to an older woman's home, which was a cave kind of underneath the town, this little, or really a village. And she served us mint tea. And, like the couple of beds were, kind of blankets on top of a stone ledge. And we just sat there and, our guide would do a little interpreting. So, I mean, that was the opposite end of the spectrum from, a grand restaurant, but they were both completely enjoyable and interesting and things we'll just never forget. So,
Wow.
yeah, those were
And that's
two.
something you can't plan for,
No,
it happens because you built the infrastructure of this experience, and all the details that fill it are kind of unknown till you go through them.
Mm-hmm.
What ended up being, I know you mentioned weather, and another thing I've heard you mention was how difficult it was to like be there, because it's an entire year. So you're going through an entire calendar year, the holidays, seasons that you don't necessarily think about, like when you're, you think about, Park City and you think about the amazing world-class snow. But there, maybe it's just the winter's a lot longer than you anticipated for an entire year, or it's not a good snow season, or it's just way hotter in the summer than you realized. And you had to deal with all that where you were, and you were away for birthdays, away for, life events. That had to be difficult. Holidays, of course.
Right. Yeah, Christmas was definitely hard because the kids visited us. They left like 4 days before Christmas because my daughter's a nurse and she had to work and couldn't get out of it. And the different languages I mean, I'm good with French. I can do okay with Spanish and Italian, but my husband doesn't really speak other languages. And so we were both so down when the kids left with Christmas. And at the last minute, he said, I just want to go somewhere where we could speak English. I'm like, just so it's so exhausting. And so we were in Northern Italy and we got an EasyJet flight to London. And so we spent the 5 days over Christmas in London, and my husband felt better. It was actually nice weather. It was only in the 50s, so it wasn't bad at all. Yeah. So we managed to get through Christmas okay. So yeah, that we did not anticipate would be so hard. It's also strange on Thanksgiving because Europeans don't celebrate, of course, American Thanksgiving. So we went to some restaurant somewhere. We were in Spain and we managed to get chicken. We had chicken for dinner, which is as close as we could get to a turkey. So yeah, so that was just a little different. So yeah, and I guess I should say in there, different countries have different cultures, and I want to try to be careful when I say different things about different people in different countries. But there are some countries where the people just culturally are so warm and they would, give you the shirt off their back, and others where they'll give you an answer but nothing more, and they're not inclined to maybe go out of their way. So I'll just say that Portugal and Greece, people were just amazing. I had a woman walk with me for half a mile in a village to show me where the post office was. I mean, she just, she did it. We had a guy in Greece who opened his restaurant for us because we were down by the port and we'd gotten the time totally wrong of when the ferry was going to leave. And So he just opened his restaurant early and, served us food so we wouldn't be waiting there for 6 hours with nothing to do. And we were
Jeez.
hungry. So, anyway.
And also, you're getting, you know, you said the holidays aren't celebrated. A lot of the holidays aren't celebrated at the same time or aren't at all. But there's
Hmm.
also just a new set of holidays.
True.
What were some? Did you go to any festivals or any sort of celebrations that you didn't anticipate, or things that you were really looking forward to that didn't align with American culture's celebrations?
Hmm. Well, the one thing was we were in France, and the Toussaint is All Saints Day, and I had forgotten that that's a big holiday, and so I think it fell on a Monday, but like the entire village we were in was closed for the entire weekend, which we hadn't anticipated. So, we had to go further afield to get some food, go grocery shopping. I'm trying to think. One of the things that we for sure had on our calendar was going to Rome for New Year's, because there's a big American contingent in Rome, and there's a huge fireworks display on New Year's, and big parties with Americans. So that was a surprise, and that was a lot of fun. And the other thing was, my husband, being from New York, my husband is a huge Giants fan, and in 2000 January, I guess it was January 2012, we were in Rome for like 6 weeks. We went to a college pub and watched with packed with Americans to watch the Super Bowl, which of course there started at 12:30 at night. So, and the game was over at, 4 in the morning. So that was totally unexpected that we happened to be in Rome and it was the Super Bowl, and, just being with all these crazy Americans, a lot of them students, was a lot of fun. And then we ended up walking a mile and a half at 4 in the morning back to our B&B that we had. So, that was that, and it was snowing. So that was a pretty cool celebration. Trying to think of other celebrations that there were. Of course, we were back in France then by Bastille Day, the 14th of July, there July 4th. So we got to be there for that. We were in the south of France for that. Um, I can't think of any
No,
other
that's
big.
interesting. I didn't expect the Super Bowl to be one of the answers.
We didn't either. It was
Right.
great.
That's
Singing
neat.
Sweet Caroline at the end of the, the
Oh, that's
thing.
funny. That is funny. So, I know you said you began writing just as a way to capture all this, but I want to ask, what do you think for folks out there who only have 2 weeks at a time right now, you having kind of that cadence every year for a few decades leading up to this, what were some of the opportunities that a much more extended period allow for folks that might be thinking of doing something like that? What are some of those moments or some of those things that you can't necessarily replicate in 2 weeks? Um,
Hmm.
I say because a lot of listeners of the show have had a long experience early on, or are looking forward to one, and right now it's maybe limited to those. Or we also have the opposite. A lot of people who are on really extended trips right now, and then looking ahead, they're getting ready to enter a much more, I don't know, regimented form of life. Uh,
Right.
but for you, what did you notice in your own life? The differences.
There was a relaxation, because if you've got a lot of time, you don't feel bad if you pack a picnic and go to a park and spend 3 hours there, just kind of observing people and all. It's hard to do that when you've got 2 weeks and you're either going to a bunch of different places, or you're in one place, but you've got your list of things you want to do. I want to see this and eat here and eat there and do that. And so you have to fit it all in. So
Yeah.
when you have more time, you're just not as rushed. You can stay in a museum for longer because you don't have three other museums to go to right away. So it's just an overall more relaxation. You can spend more time people watching, which we just love to do. And in Europe, most, not all, but most of the countries, there is a cafe culture where you can kind of just sit for hours with one little cup of coffee and just watch people go by. And yeah, you feel less stressed. I could remember on those holidays. Well, usually I had planned them so carefully. I'm a big planner, so I'd planned them. I knew how long it would take to get from this place to that, and that's the other thing too. If you're on a shorter vacation and you make a mistake, like you miscalculate when a ferry's going to leave, or you miss the bus, or the metro's on strike or something, it can be a disaster because there goes your whole schedule.
True.
Whereas when you have more time, it's not, you'll either figure out another way that maybe takes longer, or you just don't care, you don't care as much. So, I mean, I guess I would also say for us, it was easier to just wander around and maybe find a little nook and cranny to eat in, a real little locals place. Again, like I said, because in 2 weeks you have we've got to eat at this place and we got to go that and we have to go try that. And this way we had more time to stumble on things. So
as you got closer to the end of this experience, what were your feelings? Were you ready to be back? Were you kind of like, all right, this was cool, ready to be done? Or I wish it was longer? How were y'all feeling as it came to an end?
We were sad. We were definitely sad. We started counting the weeks and, the days and all that. Although we were back in France, we started in France, we ended in France, and we knew we'd be back in France because I'm such a Francophile and my husband loves France too. So we knew we'd be back. Once again, we hadn't seen our kids since early May. So we wanted to see the kids. So that was one reason to get back. But we could have stayed. We definitely could have stayed longer. But because, again, there are things that it's a different pace of life, and coming back to the US kind of meant coming back to the real world. Like we had to get jobs and we had a friend we stayed with for like 10 days, but we had to find a place to live. We didn't have that place to live when we came back. So it was bittersweet. We definitely probably could have done another month and a half, but then that would have been starting to get us back into the cold weather. And some of the cold days were kind of tricky. Yeah, we could have stayed longer.
I guess that's good, rather than like looking forward to 30 years and saying, I'm ready to be done,
Exactly.
Because obviously there's a lot, lifestyle differences. And I know being on vacation is not necessarily, not vacation, but an extended trip. There's an end point. But there had to be some impacts that it had on you. What were some of those lasting impacts that being over there a year had on you moving forward with the rest of your life here? Or were you just totally obliterated with the American culture once you got back? You know what I mean? Just overtaken.
It's hard. It's really hard not to be overtaken because, like I said, you have all those real world, real life things you got to find, housing, income, all those. We had to buy a car. That's right. We had sold all our cars. So we had 2 cars before we sold them. So we had to buy a car. So there's real tangible stuff that we had to do.
Was there a welcome back moment where it's like, oh, we're back? Probably maybe buying the car, that whole process.
There was that whole process. It says, but we ended up flying back to Florida. That's where my mother-in-law and father-in-law lived there. And my father just happened to be down in Florida visiting, or I'm sorry. Yeah, my father was down there visiting my brother who lived in Wellington, Florida. And he's a horse guy. And so they were all there. So we all went out to dinner together, and our kids, we flew our kids down. And so that was kind of a little homecoming party. We went out to a nice dinner and, all that. So that was really nice. But I think the homecoming, we were there for maybe 3 days, and then we flew back up to DC to stay with our friends. And I think it was when, we put our luggage down on the bed where in the room we were staying, and it's like, one more time we're unpacking, because we'd packed and unpacked so many times. So this is the final unpack here, that we're back where we're going to live. That was a big thing. I'll also, I guess I could say the traffic. I guess, in DC, the traffic's horrendous. So, the traffic and the noise and all that. Yeah. That,
man, wow.
That was,
unbelievable. So how did you were talking, as you got older, as you get older, you get more in shape, you get more active. And it sounds like this next adventure, the GR20, did that idea come from this gap year, or did you have that in mind beforehand?
We did not have it in mind beforehand. As one of the things we did on the gap year was, it's called the Tour de Mont Blanc. It's a hike that goes around more or less the base of Mont Blanc through 3 countries. Soon after that, we met a retired British general who heard that, we were talking about the hike that we did. And he said, well, if you did that, you must do the GR20. And we said, what's the GR20? And he had just done it. And he said, the Tour de Mont Blanc is great and it's beautiful, but it's just really a big challenge, more of a challenge to do this GR20. And so he told us about it in Corsica. And, we said then, so that was back in 2012, we said, you know what, maybe we'll do that for our 60th birthdays, because we'd left for our gap year when we were 55. So we said, maybe we'll do that. And then when we decided to actually retire when we were 60, we said, well, why don't we make this, we'll do that. And so we had a good amount of time to do the research, and Corsica was one of the few regions of France we'd never been to, but it had always been on our list. So the more we read about it, the more we said, yeah, we got to do this. So again, we sort of always need a trip, a big adventure on the horizon to look forward to and plan for. And so yeah, we'd known since the guy said it in 2012. We said we're going to do this, and did. We'd also known about the GR system of trails, mostly in France, because the Tour de Mont Blanc is partly on the GR5. So we knew about that whole system, and we knew that they're pretty well marked.
And what does that stand for? The GR?
It stands for Grande Randonnée. So in French, it means big hike. So that it's the big hikes, and they, I think they go from 1 to, I'm not sure what, but they're in the Pyrenees. There are some that go into Belgium, Luxembourg, Spain, I think, but most of them are just all over France. And some of them are easier. They're, fairly flat, but some of them, go through the Alps and go across Corsica.
GR footpath. So yeah, there's GR1 through pretty much 23, 20, 30, 40. I'm scrolling through. Oh, there's hundreds. Yeah. Okay.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
Interesting. So I love that too, because it doesn't sound like it's not the most, it sounds more like a car name than it does a hike. You know what I mean? The French GR20. Yes. It sounds like, oh, yeah, it's a car, not this amazing adventure. So I, as a marketer, that's the first thing I think about is like, it needs to be marketed a little better. But well, tell us about how you settled on this idea and how this differed from the year abroad. Obviously, a lot more, hiking and activity, shorter amount of time. But tell us about the experience of doing this and what the book itself is about and what you decided to write about through this experience.
Well, we decided to do it because once we'd read all about it, it was, it's like a point to point. And we knew that as opposed to saying, oh, we're just going to hike through the Alps or something, we knew like if we could know that we did that point to point, it would be an accomplishment. And we read a lot that said that a lot of, it's the toughest non-technical footpath in Europe. So, you don't need any equipment. I mean, there are lots that are tougher where you're using, axes and everything else, crampons and everything else. But, and we were like, you know what? We're going to be 60. Let's give it a shot. Let's see if we can do it. Let's train for it. And it'll be a good reason to go to Corsica. And my husband I know this sounds silly, but he's a marine engineer. So anytime we can get on a boat, on a ferry, a ship, he's all about it. So he's like, yeah, we get to take the ferry from Nice over to Corsica. So, pretty much once we got there, we had 2 days to just kind of acclimate to being there and on the island. And then we met up with our outfitter and our small group that we went to with. And it was pretty much just, hiking the 2 weeks was there was no time off. We just, hiked for those days. And it's really tough. And it's a really rocky island, like much of kind of the southern, countries along the Med are really rocky. So it's super, super rocky. And there's very little non-mountainous area on Corsica. There's a narrow area around the coasts that's semi-flat.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, physically, I thought doing the Tour de Mont Blanc was tough, or doing the, one side to the other of the Grand Canyon. But this was so much more because it was incessant. It was just 14. You knew you're dog tired at the end of the day, and you knew you had to get up and, at 5:30 and get up and do the whole thing again. But I mean, what was great about it was getting to know our fellow hikers. We had a lot of laughs about it. We had a lot of different personalities, and they were it was pretty much people, hikers from the UK and from the US. Although we were the only ones who live in the US. There was one US hiker who lived in Ireland. But so it was great getting to know them. And then our guide was French, but he lived on Corsica, so he knew it really well. People die on it every year for one reason or another, whether they fall off a ledge or they get lost and don't have water. We might have attempted doing it on our own if we had been younger, but we were older and we were like, we can't get lost. I mean, it's a big island. You can get lost, and there's very little water on it. So, it's you got to be with somebody who knows where the springs are and all where you can get your water.
Wow. So how did did you enjoy this more active, adventurous style experience over the gap year, or were they both? Do they stick out as equally enjoyable to y'all?
The hike was over in 2 weeks. The gap year was a year. Although when we did do the hike, we ended up being in Europe for 3 weeks because we left on the 4th of July and we trained in Iceland for a bit and then down near the Alps. And then after that, we went down to Sardinia, went over to Italy, and then went up to Provence. And again, our kids met us there. So I'd have to say the gap year. But, this is right behind because, again, we still got to be in Europe for 3 months. And it was just such a signature hike. I mean, the feeling of accomplishment at the end was fabulous.
Fantastic. Well, what does the book dive into? Because I know it's newer, and you've got one book under your belt at this point. What was that experience like, and what should folks expect diving into that?
Well, I guess I dove a bit into my thoughts about traveling and hiking, and I was thinking and talking with one other woman who was on the hike about how that maybe traveling and adventure is like genetic. You have wanderlust or you don't, and that if you start traveling when you're younger, it's so much easier to travel when you're older because you got used to it and you know it's possible and it's doable. I think there's so many people who say, "Oh, we'll travel when we retire or whatever," and they haven't traveled their whole life, and so um, they're not used to it. So I delve into that. I also delve into what it's like being a 60-year-old woman. And about 6 months before we started the hike, we were well into planning and everything else. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which was really painful for a while until we figured it out and started taking meds. So I talk about that too, about what it means to be an aging woman in a youth focused culture. How adventure, whatever that adventure is, should not just stop at a certain age. Oh, I'm 60 or I'm 65, I can't do it. So I talk a lot about that. um I give a lot of description about what we actually hiked, and some culture and flora, fauna, food, wine about Corsica, all the things that I learned when we were there. And I guess I do talk about a fair amount my childhood growing up when I was like a chubby little kid. And my family, well, some of I'm the eldest of 11 children, so there was a big family, and
It's a big old family right
everybody
there.
everybody played a little bit of sports, nothing too third string football or whatever. But my family always watched sports. They were always on the television. So I really enjoy sports, but there weren't that many women or female athletes when I was growing up in the 60s. We didn't have Title IX yet. And so I talk a lot about how I wanted to be an athlete, but I was in this chubby little body. And that at a certain point, my father said to me, like, "Oh, you're never going to make the volleyball team. You're no athlete." I was 12, so hurt and so mad. And I said, "Damn it, I'm going to do this." And I did. I made the team. And it's almost like from then on, I said, "Okay, I'm gonna be an athlete." So I talk about that and insecurities about physical performance. Also talk about how it can be really good to mark a milestone, life's milestones, whether it's a birthday, an anniversary, buying a new house, retirement, graduation from college, to mark it, the high school, to mark it with a physical challenge, because time just goes so fast, and it goes faster and faster the older you are. And so it's like it's almost like it slows it down, because you have this marker of, I did this. And even if that is, I've never been abroad before, I want to go. It doesn't have to be a 2-week hike, but just to mark things.
You're so right about time going by, and I know we're wrapping up here, but I've heard from some leaders too recently saying that something they focus on is just a yearly physical challenge that interests them, that they want to accomplish, and it does kind of mark a year. It gives this almost centerpiece to the year, or this memorable high point. And it's a bucket that, in case work or family or whatever is not going well, it gives you something else to just focus on and work towards and to be proud of. And it kind of like smooths over some of the difficulty in those other areas of your life.
It's very true.
And I've been thinking about that, and you're someone else that's basically saying that same thing. That's like, yeah, that's I think that's important for all of us to have something like this to look forward to. Wow, that's really interesting. So what, taking that into consideration, what is on the horizon for y'all? Because I know with a lot of these adventures, it's all you're thinking about is, I mean, even everything from even a small work trip for me, I can't even think past that. And the next thing you know, it's over. Then I'm like,
right
on the other side, like, whoa, what just happened? All right, now what?
Yeah.
What is kind of your next thing on the horizon, whether that be, retirement, and if I don't know if you have already, but another book, another experience, or are you kind of just waiting to see what comes
Yeah.
into view?
I always have something that's percolating up there, always. And I will say we were going to do something for our 65th birthday. I think maybe hiking through the Dolomites or something. I'm not sure, but COVID came in, so that went away. But next year we'll be 68, and we're planning to do the coast to coast across England. So, and we're gonna take our dog with us. So, and that we'll just do on our own. So we've got a lot of research and all to do on that. But that's sort of the next big adventure, physical adventure that we'll do. The other thing is I finished writing a novel, which takes place in France, of course, but that's got a lot of editing to go through. But that is the next book that I have, and I may write about the walk, the coast to coast walk.
Wow.
But we'll see if I'm inspired.
How's the dog feeling about it?
She's a little 19-pound black lab Chihuahua mix, so she's small, but she's really athletic. So she'll be fine.
She'll be fine. She'll be fine.
She loves to hike. We've taken her on many, up to 15-mile hikes, and that's about what we'd walk a day for like 3 weeks to cross England. So
no kidding,
she's
that's
good.
awesome. Oh, that'll be fun. That'll be so much fun. She doesn't know yet, but she's gonna have a good time out there in this new land with all these new smells and experiences. Yes. Do you think you would have discovered this passion for riding without doing these big adventures?
To be absolutely honest, I'm not sure that I would. It wasn't that I need to be passionate about something to write about it. Like, 'cause some people say, well, why don't you write about, going down the Grand Canyon and the Dory and all this stuff? And I said, it was wonderful, but it just somehow didn't inspire me, the writing muse. And I guess for me, travel is my muse. So, it needs to be something where I feel like I have something to say about it. So you're right. I may not have without these adventures, but then maybe I wouldn't be who I am. So maybe I'd want to write about something else. I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah. I know I wouldn't be podcasting. At least I mean, I might be. I don't know. You can't. Yeah, like you said, you can never know. But I know that is because now of adventure. And what I love to talk to people about is, a lot of times the benefits in the experience and the adventure is the legacy is nothing you'd anticipate. Kind of like when you were, some of the more memorable experiences is having tea in a cave in Morocco. You didn't plan that. You just knew that you wanted to do this trip, and all the things that are just memories looking back. It's nothing you could ever expect. And all these skills and passions and connections and relationships, you can't foresee it on this side of an adventure. That's why we just tell people, go. It's going to change you. You're going to discover things, and you never know. You might discover this newfound passion. So,
exactly right. Or somebody will tell you something that you never thought of, and like, I want to do that, or I need
the GR20
something that way. So
exactly. Your next adventure will come from a retired French military
exactly. It's
person
a general.
telling you, telling you got to do this.
We weren't going to tell the general no.
No. I wouldn't either. When you said you were a French major, I was like, oh, in the military. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
In college. But, well, Marianne, thank you so much for telling us a little bit about this. Really, really interesting stories. I love that, it's everybody's adventure situation's different. Some people right now listening to the show are traveling full time and have been for years. Others are right in the middle of child rearing or college or all of that, and so it's interesting to hear how folks build adventure in their life. And I think you're doing it in a really, really amazing way. So thanks for joining us and telling a little bit about your story.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was nice talking to you. Great. Thanks so
All right.
much, Mason.
See you. Yep.
Okay.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.